Children frolicking on a summer afternoon. Lush fruit ripening in the hot sun. Golf courses as green as emeralds. Behind each of these appealing scenes, a drama is being played out between two protagonists, man and water. We have insisted that water go where we want it to, when we want it. Proudly we think of ourselves as masters of our universe. Yet water has fought back, sometimes ferociously, and often with success. My name is Mark de Villiers. As a journalist, I've traveled much of the world, and almost everywhere I've been, I've witnessed a common shared conflict, a conflict between man and water. My first experience with this struggle was as a child on the arid plains of South Africa, the place where I was born, on the edge of what my ancestors called the Thirst Land. My grandfather was a farmer in this uncertain land, and water, the idea of water, the longing for water, consumed his life. With sweat, fanatic labor, and teams of oxen, my grandfather and his workers built an earthen dam on his farm, rather like this one. Many years, however, the rains never came, and the water in the dam would begin to shrink and the stock to perish. However, when it did rain, it rained in cloudbursts, and my grandfather would gloomily patrol the dam wall, looking desperately for cracks and fissures that would threaten to tear the dam apart. He was always afraid that his life and his livelihood would be washed away with the dam itself. Years later, I realized that my grandfather's small struggle was representative of humanity's much larger battle for survival. Nothing is more satisfying and more beautiful than the countryside after a good rain. But for much of the world, this dream of rain coming at the right time, in sufficient quantity to grow crops, to fill our rivers and dams, is a dream unfulfilled far more often than we would like. Even in a country with as much water as Canada, there are vast areas which are under enormous stress. Doug Horrell is a Saskatchewan dryland farmer. There is no place but the sky from which he can get his water.
I can't remember any season in the recent history being this dry. We have cracks that a child could easily twist an ankle in the fields. If you had a nice crop of robin lentils, you wouldn't even see the ground. It would be canopy. It concerns me because this year's done and we're going into a dry fall, and next spring's going to come. And if we don't get snow, if we don't get spring moisture, next year's I'm a little concerned, very concerned about it.
Much of southern Alberta and Saskatchewan was declared too dry for agriculture more than 100 years ago, but people came anyway. And for the most part, large-scale irrigation has been deemed too expensive.
Rain is everything. Without rain, without moisture, there's no farming.
Yet for some, living by the whims of nature is unacceptable, no matter what the cost. At first glance, there seems to be no sign of the fight for survival in this sunny scene. California, a Garden of Eden. a place of abundance where the weather is warm, the orchards and fields are overflowing with succulent things to eat, where the golf courses are remarkably green. But the California of today is not the handiwork of nature, it is the product of man.
What you see behind me is really what Southern California looks like from its indigenous, original view or image. It is a semi-arid, edge of the desert place. And prior to the importation of water in any kind of significant volume, things had to grow on their own by seasonal rainfall, and in the summer, what you see behind me is what you got in Southern California.
Riverside, California, famous for its Valencia oranges. The Glass family has been growing citrus fruit here for decades.
My grandfather bought an orange grove in Orange County, and I think it was 1903. And so we've been farming, the family's been farming oranges since 1903. In my grandfather's time, that he did not have diminishing supply of his well water. The wells did not lower each year. When my father took over using the same wells, they in turn started, because everybody was developing around that area, putting in their own wells. The groundwater supply lowered, and each year there became less water available. His groundwater had subsided to the point that he just did not have enough water to continue.
By the 1960s, housing developments were overrunning Orange County, and the Glass family moved 60 miles northeast to Riverside, California.
So we started out with maybe 100 acres the first year, and then we ended up planting several thousand acres.
We're in the middle of a 100-acre citrus grove, Navel, Valencia, Tangerine. This is one of our original pieces that we started on. We've been farming, we planted this back in '63. I'm very proud of it. Dad's he's done a super job here. He started here with pretty much with nothing in 1962. Everyone thought he was crazy for coming up to this. It was pretty much a desert then.
In Riverside, there is no underground water. It must be piped in from as far as 1,000 kilometers away. But with abundant water comes development, and once again the Glass family is packing up and starting over with their citrus business. Water is the spoiler once again. This time, it's the cost.
We're not getting enough back from this fruit to pay our water bills, let alone the rest of the farming expense.
There is no such thing as cheap water, but I mean, we have the most expensive water you can buy. Every year, in small increments, they keep raising our prices to the point now that we are so high that we are not competitive with the agriculture and other growing areas. Our water costs are 2/3 of our entire cost. In most areas, they are 20%, 25%. That's normal, and we are 66%. So we find ourselves losing money on an annual basis, so we are voluntarily shutting our water off ourselves.
We're going to end up selling and moving to other areas. You know, moving our operation, the bulk of it up to Kern County and out into the desert. Does it make me sad? Yeah, I like it here. I'm happy farming right here. I'm not a developer, I'm a farmer. This is what I like to do. I wish it could keep going here, but if, you know, we used to farm in Orange County and the same thing kind of happened there. And so, actually my grandpa told me that it would. He said, you know, I've seen it in Orange County. This is all going to be, it's going to be homes and, you know, shopping centers and this, you know, I'm like, oh, Gramps, come on. Not in my lifetime. He says, no, not in mine, but definitely in yours. And yeah, he was right on. Some of these groves are going out now because of the water here. God, I planted when I was a little kid, and it's hard to see them go. I mean, you've been working here all your life, and in these groves, and God, it's just, you know. It's hard to, I know it's hard for my dad. It's got to be hard for him after, you know, planting everything. It's just hard to see him go. Hard to shut that water off.
The natural ecosystem of Southern California, without the intervention of human technologies, would be able to support a maximum population of 2 million people.
Southern California now has over 15 million people in the 7 contiguous counties of Southern California. 15 million people. There's no way the natural carrying capacity of this area could sustain that many people. It's the technological delivery of water that makes it possible.
California thrives today only because someone figured out how to transport water from where it is plentiful to here in the near desert. But the burgeoning population is putting incredible strains on the water delivery system.
The success of the irrigation infrastructure that sustained the citrus enterprise for well over 60 years really contained the seeds of its own demise, because it made possible the arrival of more and more people, which requires more and more water. Whereas the rest of the world look at California, look at what we did, look at the vastly expanding population, and say this is a way to maintain it, to bring an ability to feed the population, to build urban development, to build industrial development. They all want what we have, or what we had. That is the paradox. How do you tell them, don't do it? We think it should have been done differently now.
We seem on the surface so good at taming water. This has inspired some of the greatest and some of the most disastrous construction projects in the world. The famous Hoover Dam. This is the granddad of all the mammoth water engineering schemes that now dot the globe. It impounds Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States. In 1928, the Boulder Canyon Project Act was signed into being by U.S. President Calvin Coolidge. The act allocated $165 million for the construction of the Hoover Dam, the Imperial Dam, and the All-American Canal. But it would be the Hoover Dam that would become the largest water engineering project ever conceived or built until that point in time.
The idea and the purpose behind Hoover Dam was to dam up the most dangerous river in the world. The idea was to build a dam somewhere along the Colorado River to stop the flooding, to control the water flows, and to protect the lower land, store these floodwaters in reservoirs so that you have a reliable source of water year-round. There's always an environmental impact in anything you do. You just have to weigh the differences in the need of the people, the need of the country to get bigger and stronger. We're irrigating 1.5 million acres of land in the Imperial Valley and Coachella Valley and acreage in southwestern Arizona. These areas, because of Lake Mead, are able to produce 68% of the vegetable crop for the United States and 25% of the fruit and nut crop. Water will always go where the people go. And when you talk about the benefits of the water that we have stored behind Hoover Dam and the other reservoirs, you allowed your country to expand a great deal more in a shorter period of time. And it was the greatest solution they had at the time. And today it's still one of the greatest solutions.
That is certainly the philosophy of the 20th century, at least in the United States, but I think throughout the world, that we could tame nature.
Hoover Dam, folks, 726.4 feet high. It's 660 feet thick down at the base. That's over 2 football fields thick.
Hoover Dam really was, in a sense, the epitome of the 1930s and the 1940s belief that large infrastructure was the answer. Today, we realize that large infrastructure may contribute to the answer, but it may also contribute to problems.
Well, it wreaks havoc downstream. It changes the watershed in very profound ways. It may, in some instances, end up completely changing the habitat. It also transforms once wild places into large bathtubs.
The dam stood like a sentinel, white and beautiful in the desert sunlight, guarding the river and its downstream wealth.
The engineering success of the Hoover Dam paved the way for a frenzy of dam construction around the world. But there has been one consequence of this building spree that few people predicted.
This blue mark you see here was the highway for my people. Just like the blacktop is today for the people down south. The river was their livelihood.
When man goes about taming water, it's often the ordinary person, the powerless person, the person who has no say, who pays the price.
There's an estimate that tens of millions of people in the 20th century were displaced from their homes by the massive reservoirs behind the big dams that we built in the 20th century. And those people were displaced without discussion, without their participation in the water planning process.
For eons, Woodland Cree have centered their lives around the Churchill River in northern Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Here was found an amazing abundance of sturgeon, pickerel, whitefish, of waterfowl, of medicinal herbs. When the fur trade began, it was the major highway for trappers and traders. The trapping right in the area here was among the best, and along its banks, the Cree spirits roamed. This is an event known as a river gathering. It is an act of prayer and celebration, a way of giving thanks for the waters and the great abundance they provide.
It's right here, it's telling us.
Today, the river gathering has become a forum for community discussion and action. Celebration has given way to frustration.
It's destroying our water, destroying our fish. The drinkability of our water is being destroyed. The most important aspect of life today, water. It's more important than gold, oil.
This is the Island Falls hydroelectric dam in the remote wilderness of Saskatchewan's northern forest. It was constructed in 1929 to supply power to the Hudson Bay Mining and Smelting Company.
I arrived here July of 1927 with my parents. We noticed that there were 3 big tents here. And then we heard, a little bit later that day, my dad was telling me that they were going to build this big building with stone, which was the power plant.
Like many other dams, Island Falls was not constructed to serve the people in the immediate neighborhood. It would be 30 years after the hydroelectric facility was built before the local people even got electricity in their homes.
They were short of power, so they had to come and look for power here in order to provide all the power to the mine in Flin Flon, Manitoba. And seeing that it was a cheap source of power, the company came down and built this monster on our major river, which is the Churchill River. The reason why I call it a monster is because of all the damage it did to our resources.
A lot of people don't recognize the impact of hydro. They feel it's clean power. And it is far from the truth when you are living off the land.
Look at all those trees that they flooded. 13 miles up, right from here, 13 miles up is all flooded area. And we lost our traditional feeding grounds where the moose used to hang around, where the caribou used to hang around, where the bears used to hang around, and all the fair-bearing animals.
When the main dam was being built, that's when it really impacted on our resources. All the animals, The beaver, the muskrat, and even the fish, they all began to disappear. The sturgeon that had been in the river that I had seen and my parents had seen were all gone. It really hurts me right here that they never notified us, never warned us about all this.
It went through 5 generations before we got them to understand to employ 5 people study at the power plant here. You know, and look at how much resources we lost.
And the word that we call in Cree is called Bimatsiswin. It's the act of survival, the act of making a living. You're living off the land, you're living off the waters. And there is a certain amount of satisfaction and respect and vision, connection that you have with the land and the waters. And in many cases, it is a strong one because you have to be able to survive from it. Your living depends on it.
7 cabins went underwater. That's our people's cabins, our people's homes.
While the Cree who live near Island Falls are furious at their loss, on the other side of the world, people are telling the same story. Yellow silt and muddy waters gave the Yellow River its name. Flowing 3,000 miles from Kunlun Mountains to the Yellow Sea, it used to be called China's Sorrow because of the disastrous floods the silting caused. Year after year, people were forced out of their homes, their farms destroyed. Waterborne diseases brought sickness. Now, with the construction of dams and fortifications, it's much tamer. But what has been the cost? The people who lived along the banks of the Wei River, a tributary of the Yellow, can certainly answer that question.
My grandfather was a boatman. My father was a boatman, and I am one too.
Mr. Wong lived in a village on the south side of the Wei River. For 3 generations, his family made a prosperous living as boatmen.
In the southern part of the river, everyone made a living on the dock. At its prime, the Wei River could carry more than 90 boats, and all the 5 provinces in this region depended on this river. No matter where you were from, you had to take boats to cross the river. It was a bustling place. You could find everything you needed on the riverbank, just like a shopping mall now. Years ago, the people in the village only used water from the river. Shenyang's popular noodles were made with the river water. The river water tasted so good and made the noodles really special.
Then in the early 70s, the upstream city of Baoji started to build a dam on the Wei River. After the dam was completed, the Wei River was emptied of its water. Mr. Wong and all the villagers lost their jobs.
I prefer to be a boatman. I like working on the boat. Now I'm a peasant. The only farmland available is the riverbed. I have no other choices.
The boatman has become a farmer. His land a dry riverbed. When water goes away, it takes more than the drinking supply with it. traditions, employment, culture, and simple human dignity all are lost. China has 22% of the world's people, but less than 6% of its natural fresh water. The country is facing severe shortages and an uncertain environmental future. What happens in China is important to the world. We'll be watching China closely. In 1900, there were no dams in the world higher than 15 meters. By 1950, there were 5,000, but only 2 of them were in China. Today, there are more than 50,000 major dams in the world, and incredibly, more than half of them are in China. Fengjie is known as the town of poetry since it has attracted artists for thousands of years. They came here for inspiration, attracted by the spectacular view of the Yangtze River and the idyllic lifestyle of the people who plied the river for a living. This temple is the town's main landmark. It has stood here for more than 1,300 years. Soon the waters will come. The famous town of Fengjie will be washed away, and the temple will stand on its own island in the middle of a vast lake. This is man-made destruction carried out in the name of the common good. The Three Gorges Dam is the most audacious attempt yet by man to manhandle nature.
三峡库区呢，它最后选择的这个方案是175米的这个坝高。
The reservoir will cover 600 square kilometers, which means that the 20 counties in the Hubei and the Chongqing provinces will be totally flooded.
区县。 然后从库区本身来讲的话，它也会
more than 60,000 acres of vast farmland, plus another 30,000 acres of forest, will be completely flooded.
耕地良好的耕地，还有15万亩的这个园林地。
Many tourist attractions will also be flooded.
它会淹没很多的这个工矿企业。
The construction of the Three Gorges Dam will require relocation of 1.3 million people from their homes. This is the most difficult problem in the history of dam construction.
This Chinese character means tear down. This red line is the high water mark. Anything below it will be submerged. "2,300 years of history will disappear as hundreds of communities are buried beneath 175 meters of water that will make up the Three Gorges Reservoir. Everything, as far as the eye can see, will be submerged forever. The Yangtze is China's longest river. It flows 6,300 kilometers through 11 provinces before reaching the sea. In the past 2,000 years, the Yangtze has raged over its banks more than 200 times. In 1998 alone, floods along the river killed 4,000 people, left 14 million homeless, and resulted in a loss of $24 billion.
Our government began thinking of building the Three Gorges Dam, and the discussion continued for more than 30 years. This decision concluded that China would be better off with the Three Gorges Dam than without it.
Since construction started in 1992, the debate has raged. Would the benefits outweigh the destruction? Certainly the Chinese will have access to much-needed power. When it's finished, the hydroelectric plant will generate 85 billion kilowatts every year, as much as 15 nuclear power plants. And in a country with some of the worst air pollution in the world, the dam will provide clean power generation equivalent to the burning of 50 million tons of coal a year. The Three Gorges Dam will store over 5 trillion gallons of water in a reservoir that will allow the passage of massive freighters into the nation's interior. And to ensure that all this work is not easily undone by nature, the dam structure is being engineered to withstand an earthquake of 7.0 on the Richter scale. But critics point to some startling facts. It is estimated that the Yangtze River will deposit as much as 700 million tons of silt into the reservoir each year, literally filling it up and quickly rendering it useless to prevent floods. The silt will also clog the new shipping ports and negate any improvements in navigation. Over 1,600 factories and mines will be submerged by the time the dam is completed. Environmentalists predict the inevitable release of toxins associated with these industries will create serious health hazards. More than 1 trillion meters of raw sewage are dumped into the Yangtze River every year. Historically, this pollution has been flushed downstream and out into the ocean. Now it will simply accumulate in the Three Gorges Reservoir. And if the unthinkable should happen, if the dam should ever collapse, millions of people who live immediately downstream would be drowned. The Chinese government is making a huge investment to relocate and rebuild homes for the displaced people. Still, for the people who have to leave their ancestral homes, it's a heartbreaking moment.
These dams that we've built will end up being merely a blink of the eye in geologic time as for how long they're around. Eventually the river will have its way, the dams will collapse. That's not to say that the struggle of human beings to survive in nature won't continue. It will very much continue. But as for ruling nature, I think Mother Nature will have the upper hand.
As we manipulate our precious water more and more, the dollars needed to put these mammoth schemes into place and to fix the damage they cause have soared. It may be that in the future, only wealthy governments will be able to supply water to their citizens. If water won't flow to us willingly, we humans are bound and determined to get it to where we need it. My grandfather was a farmer in desperately dry South Africa. He spent his entire life trying to control his destiny by controlling water. Near the end of his life, he brought in a drilling rig that bored 300 meters into the earth. It struck a hidden stash of water placed there by nature millennia ago. The water that saved his drought-stricken farm had been just beneath his feet. My grandfather's small puncture in the earth likely didn't do much harm to the aquifer below him. But worldwide trends are moving towards bigger and bigger mining projects. Libya is situated in North Africa. The Sahara Desert occupies almost all of its land, and it is one of the most arid countries in the world. Nearly 80% of Libya's population is situated along the country's coast and relies entirely on groundwater found in coastal aquifers. By the late 1970s, these aquifers were running dangerously low. Libya was running out of fresh water, fast.
Well, let's just step back. In effect, there's a groundwater, fresh water all over Libya, or all over the Sahara, which 10,000 years ago was green and full of animals and rain. Now, it's only in the low parts where this groundwater can be seen, where you have oases. And the desert Arabs dig down, and as they use the water, they have to dig deeper.
Beneath the Sahara Desert, there are vast aquifers, actually discovered while drilling for oil, which hold billions of liters of water.
It's typical when you drill an oil well, you log the formations that you're going through, and they found that the fresh water goes down to something like 2,000 feet.
But to bring water from 500 meters underground to the surface would be a seriously expensive undertaking for the people of Libya. Luckily, Libya has oil, lots of oil, which has made the exploitation of groundwater a dream come true. The great man-made river was born.
With the aid of Allah, we will cause water to spring.
The nation which controls its water controls its destiny. At least that is the belief of Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi. To most, an international pariah. Nevertheless, to the people of Libya, he is a hero.
And he said, we are a rich oil country, and everybody in our nation should benefit from this oil wealth. When they discovered that there was a lot of fresh water in the Sahara, 800 kilometers inland, they raised the question, should we bring the water to the coast, to the farmers, or should we move the farmers to the water? And he decided to bring the water to the farmers.
Gaddafi decreed that he was going to build a new Libyan civilization. He embarked upon the largest water mining project in history, the Great Man-Made River Project of Libya. The scale of the project is indeed unprecedented. Construction began in 1984, and when it is finished, likely in about 2020, it will stretch 5,000 kilometers across the Sahara Desert, the largest engineering project in human history.
So he's built a series of huge pipes. These are 15 feet in diameter. You could drive a car through them. And there's a specially built truck that can just carry one of these, and they have a factory building these segments, and they've assembled these pipes. The cost doesn't compute, really. They're spending too much on it, but it was a nation-building decision.
The irony of water being discovered while drilling for oil cannot be overlooked. It is in fact oil money that will pay for the desperately needed fresh water, and it is here that the true value of resources becomes clear. All the oil in the world means absolutely nothing if you have nothing to drink. Today, the pipeline already carries more than 6 million cubic meters of water per day to Libya's 4 million people. That represents an incredible 1,000 liters per person per day. That's almost 3 times the water available to North Americans. The man-made river will allow farms to flourish where once there was only desert. It will mean that Libya won't have to depend on any foreign power for its water supply. If all of this sounds too good to be true, it is.
It is fossil water. It is not being replenished. And in something like 50 years, it's going to be exhausted. And that raises interesting questions. If you build a whole civilization around this fossil water supply and it goes, now what?
Like its oil, Libya's water will one day run out completely, and all that it is nourished will disappear. But this is not just a problem for Libya. The wells of the world are indeed destined to run dry sooner or later. And as we are discovering in every part of the world, sooner is closer than we ever thought possible. My grandfather was a man who lived life on a simple scale. He had no choice. Like many of the world's people, his resources were limited. But at the same time, his ambitions rarely exceeded the capabilities of those resources. Maybe if he had more money, more technology, more power, he would have done battle with water and forced it into giving greater abundance to his farm and greater comfort to his life.
We've built an enormous number of big dams and large aqueducts to move water from one place to another, to store it in the wet seasons so we can use it in the dry seasons. And that infrastructure has brought tremendous benefits, but it also came with enormous costs, ecological costs, economic costs, and political costs. And the truth is, it's the 21st century, and we still have terrible water problems and terrible fights over water. And if anyone believes that building just one more dam or building another aqueduct will solve our problems once and for all, they're mistaken.
Our efforts to change our world will likely continue as long as we inhabit the earth. The challenge is to do things with a lot more care and caution than we've managed in the past. And to always remember that all of the water that is. We cannot make new water.